All right, all right, all right. Welcome back to the Misfit Nation. If you have not had the chance, check out our first book, 13 Step Guide to Success. It is available on paperback and Kindle editions through Amazon. If you are listening or watching for the first time, thanks for joining, and be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast apps. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel, _Misfit Nation. So you'll stay up to date on all episodes as they're released, while also having the opportunity of getting to hear the stories of our amazing guests. Speaking of which, our next guest was born and raised in the Cache Valley. At the age of 8, he began to realize that the home he lived in was peculiar. His parents still owned that farmhouse, built in the mid-1880s. Strange experiences such as phantom knocks, loud boots, running up the stairs, and missing objects became commonplace for him as he grew up. With each run-in with what he called the man in the hat, his interest in the paranormal grew. His parents forbade him from telling anyone of his experiences for fear that others in their small community would think what they would think. He found solace in learning everything he could about his encounters from library books. As he reached his teen years, his friends would visit his home and have their own experiences. This opened the door for him to tell others of his experiences. As he shared his extraordinary stories with his friends, friends of friends came to him sharing their stories with their brushes of the supernatural, which has led to where he is now. So without further ado, let's welcome to the Misfit Nation, Mr. John Olsen, author.
Hey, thank you. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk with you.
I'm glad we were able to connect via this beautiful internet world we have now, where linking up with people is a lot easier than it used to be. I wouldn't have to try to run into you by happenstance around the world, and this is a lot easier this way.
Yeah, it's amazing the way you can just connect with people now. It's great.
You get the virtual high five, virtual handshakes, and get these things going. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So, John, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit more about the backstory from your experiences as a child to how that shaped to where you are now.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I grew up in northern Utah, and in the home I grew up in was built in 1883. It was originally built by the railroad, and it was part of a farm. Back in the day when they were building the railroad, that's how the government paid the railroad to build the railroad, was by giving them land, which they would turn around and either use or sell off. And that was a farm up here that they had done that with. They'd partialed it off and then sold it. It has been in my family since the 1920s. So a lot of that time it's been part of my family. But as I grew up, I didn't take long, about 8 years old, I realized that a lot of things that happened in my house didn't happen at my friend's house. There were strange things going on. And it just piqued my interest in the paranormal. And I started reading everything I could and watching everything I could. I remember as a kid watching the reruns of the show with Leonard Nimoy, In Search of, which always had paranormal stories and stuff. So it just kind of grew from there with my own stories. And then later on, as I did share my stories, other people started coming to me. And then as my first book came out about 5-6 years ago now, it's even grown further to where the first couple books were, northern Utah and the West. Now I get stories and interview people from Mexico all the way to Canada and all the way across the United States.
So your reach has actually grown via your research and of course your first book coming out. Have you had contact like with a lot of the famous paranormal guys that are out there now? Have any of them reached back to you since your book came out?
I've got to meet a lot of different people out there in the paranormal world. I've interviewed with Jason Hawes from Ghost Hunters, and Shannon LeGros. She's a big one too. She's got a podcast as well and does television shows. And I've just met a lot of people. It's amazing because the paranormal world, there's a lot of great people in that, kind of like-minded people. So it's been nice to meet a lot of different people.
I bet it's opened up, and once your book came out, once they got to know who you were, I'm sure that opened even more avenues as they introduce you to friends of friends, and that keeps going on and on. So
Yeah.
you get to go to more and more of the shows that they put on. I forget what they're called, Spirit Con or Paranormal Cons and stuff, and
Right.
the conferences, and that'll help you build your brand and also learn more about other things other people are seeing or hearing, and maybe compare that to some of the experiences you had as a child. And
Yeah.
speaking of which, when you were, I mean, as a young man growing up and having all this stuff happen, at first I'm sure you were just taken aback by it, like what is going on? Were you ever frightened so much that you didn't want to be there, or were you just trying to absorb more and more of it?
There were very few occasions where I was actually afraid. I remember one time I actually did see a full body apparition, which was the guy you mentioned, the man in the hat. That's what we called them as kids. Um, and I came home from school. I was about to turn on the television. I was alone in the house, and he walked into the front room, and I could see through him, but I could see he had a white shirt and overalls and a wide brim hat. And he sat down in the chair across from me and started rocking back and forth in the rocking chair. And I closed my eyes and I counted to 10 and I opened my eyes and he was gone, but the rocking chair was still rocking. And so I ran out to the front porch until my mom came home. But so there were a few times when I got really, I would say I was scared, but the older I got and the more experiences I had, I just found it more fascinating than scary for sure.
I mean, that would scare just about anyone walking in and having the man in the hat sitting there with his
Yeah,
overalls on and rocking in a chair while you're trying to figure out what is going on. Your mind's like, whoa, you're right. What's happening? I'm just a young man. What's happening?
yeah, exactly.
And I understand that in a small community, your parents probably were very worried about I guess the stigma that might get put on your family if you started broadcasting this stuff was going on in there. It was, oh, that's that crazy family that thinks they see things in their house. But whereas
Yeah,
I'm sure in that area, every house up there was probably built around the same time or even older, and they probably had experiences too. They just didn't want to share too.
right. And that's what's interesting is, as I started sharing my experiences as a teenager, it was amazing to me how many people started coming to me and sharing their experiences. And it eventually grew, not just ghost stories, but UFO stories and Bigfoot and cryptids and all different kinds of paranormal stories. So,
Yeah, when I was growing up, we had a couple things happen in our house. We lived in an apartment in New Jersey, and one day we came home and we had the crucifix in my mom and almost all our rooms had a crucifix, but the one in my mom and dad's room we came home was upside down
oh
when we came
wow.
from school. And so that threw us off. We had my mom had the priest, the family priest, come in, and he did a blessing of the house, and it seemed like everything was all right. And then one of my cousins, he died by suicide, and
Mhm.
we were at a gathering. It was at Christmas time, so all the family was at the house, and we took a picture, and he was actually in the picture
Oh wow.
when it came out. So that
Wow.
that threw everything off, and the priest had to come back in again and bless the house.
Yeah.
And so it was all. That was my first two experiences, and then later in life, I was stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas, with the Army. And Fort Riley, Kansas, is an old base, old military base from back in the Custer days.
Oh wow.
And so there's a lot of limestone, so a lot of stuff keeps the energy and all that stuff there. And I was in one of the oldest buildings, and we was waiting for a hail and farewell we're doing that night. So I stayed at work, and I was going to take a shower. We had a shower in the building. I went down. There's the only one in the building. I got in the shower. All of a sudden, the light went off, turned back on, and there was a bucket in the shower with me.
Oh wow. That would definitely be freaky
Yeah. So that was the one time I actually got nervous. I ran down the hallway just with my towel, and I got dressed in my offices, ran out the building.
to
So
set it out.
so that's enough for me right there. So I've
Yeah.
had experiences too, and I understand not wanting to share sometimes, but that one I've shared, and I've laughed about that one many times with my other friends from Fort Riley who also had weird experiences out there.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, it's funny how some places tend to just seem to hold on to spirits like that. So, especially older ones like that, amazing men that have come through there and all the history there.
They said once Custer left, they said never change, don't change the base, and of course he never came back
Yeah.
because of what happened up there, and they they said his spirit haunts the base because he never was able to really come back.
Oh, right. Gotcha. That's awesome.
So have you done any I guess ghost hunting, like go and actually do investigations at other people's places, or just do you just collect stories from others and listen to what they have seen?
So on occasion, I will get invited to go with groups. There's several groups in this area that I'm good friends with, and my wife and I will get invited to go on investigations, and those are really fun to do when we can do those on occasion, which is nice. And I also have the opportunity because of my books. People will come to me if they have a problem in their home or something, and I'm usually able to talk them through it. We go through and could it possibly be something that's explainable, which it is, quite a few times, and if it's not, what is it? What can be going on? So, and if it's further away than that I can get to, I have groups that I trust to go and help those families out. So it's kind of since my books came out, it's kind of been a lot of different things that I've been able to do, which, like you say, it opens up different doors for you all the time, and just really fun, all the stuff to be able to investigate and look at.
Definitely. And I'm sure a lot of the stories that you've heard are just amazing as well. And I know you're encapsulating those in the books, and as well as trying to help those who have those stories. But what's the scariest story that you've heard?
Oh boy, there's been so many. I'll tell you what's fascinating to me about the stories is when I get a story, and I'll share one for an example. I'll get a story and it feels like just a one-off scary story, and this is one of my favorite ones because what happened was um, I had interviewed this guy. It happened to him when he was a kid. They were camping, and they always camped with their family, extended family, and everything. And him and the cousins were playing. It was getting a little bit later in the afternoon, and they were playing um, hide and seek, and he was the one that had to go seek people, and they were all told they couldn't get too far away from camp. They weren't allowed to get too far away from camp. And he found a few of the other cousins, but he had a cousin that was a couple years older than him that he really looked up to, and he was trying to find him. And he noticed away from camp towards this little canyon draw that went up the hill, he could see his cousin behind a tree, and his cousin was waving for him to follow him. So he walked up to the tree, and his cousin was gone, and he looked up the trail, and his cousin is further up the trail and is waving him on. And so goes up to the next tree, and again his cousin's missing. And this happens quite a few times until he realizes he's really far up this canyon and away from camp. And his cousin is again, up further waving for him to follow. And he just gets a really weird feeling. He knows it's not supposed to be that far. So he yells that we're not supposed to be this far away from camp. I'm going back. And he just got a creepy feeling. So he ends up running back to camp. And when he gets there, his mother's like, "Where have you been? Well, it's time for dinner." And he says, "Well, I was following my cousin up the canyon." And he looks, and his cousin's sitting at the fire eating a hot dog. And he goes, how did you beat me back here?" And he goes, "I didn't." And his mom's like, "He was hiding under the trailer. I saw him hiding there the whole time." So it was something else that was trying to lure him away from camp, that looked like his cousin, that was, not an adult, but almost an authority figure. You know how when you're younger, you got an older friend or an older cousin.
Right.
And he was really freaked out about that. So I wrote that story up and put it in one of my books. And it was amazing to me how many people contacted me after that. And they were like, "I thought I was the only one that had the experience." I think I've interviewed up to like 4 or 5 different people now who have at some point in their life had either a brother or a sister, something mimic a brother or a sister or or a cousin, and try and lure these kids into abandoned buildings or into the woods or away from the house, and it ends up not being their brother or their cousin. And so it was a scary story that I thought might be just a one-off, really scary story that ended up being a phenomena that I was unaware of, that was going on. So it's really interesting when something like that happens, scary like that.
Yeah, that kind of makes you think that maybe that person or that entity was trying to lure him to either be kidnapped or something along the way as
Yeah.
well. Some evilness above on the top of that hill or on the other side of it where no one could see. So
Mhm.
that's kind of wild. and the whole time thinking it was his cousin the whole time. That is crazy.
Yeah, it was really creepy. So, in fact, I had a woman contact me shortly after, and she had been on the other side where her cousin came back and was yelling at her for trying to get her to go up the canyon, further. And she's like, I've been here the whole time. And it was right less than a mile from where the original had happened. So
Wow.
it's really kind of creepy for sure.
Did you get to visit that site after, or did you just have to go based on what they said?
No, it's not too far from where I live,
Okay.
in the mountains. I've been there a lot of times actually. Growing up here, and when I was younger, the woods was my place to be, hunting, fishing. And so I know a lot of the area, and so I've actually been able to go there specifically where that happened, and see it. It's kind of fascinating.
Did you have any weird feeling while you're there? Like sometimes people say they feel either a shift in the weather, cold or hot when it shouldn't be, or anything like that when you were in that area.
Not at the time, but I do know that area. It's up Logan Canyon, which is Logan Canyon's the main canyon, and it's way up further up where this happened. But um, there is a lot of folklore and a lot of ghost stories associated with Logan Canyon,
Wow.
from orbs, and just there's a place called the Nunnery. It was originally a nunnery up the canyon, and it's supposedly super haunted. And it's just amazing. A lot of stories that are in that area. Bigfoot is a big person. A lot of sightings in that area. So it's just really an active place in all kinds of paranormal.
So it's got to be fun for someone like you who enjoys it, and also to bring others in now that your network has grown to maybe have them come visit and see if they can get any of those same experiences and help your community there. Because I mean that's a wild story there, and you'd hope that wouldn't happen to someone again there.
Yeah, exactly. You never know. So, and
Right,
I often wonder how many times, somebody did go too far and we never heard the story. So,
right, and we don't know what actually happened on the other side.
right, exactly. Exactly.
So
Hmm.
you have 5 books out right now,
I do. I have 5 books out now, and I'm actually working on my sixth one right now, which will be out in August, I'm hoping. So, yep.
and all those are on Amazon.
Yeah, all of them are on Amazon. If you look up Stranger Bridgerland book series, it'll be there. So it's easy to find, or you can go to my website, which is strangerbridgerland.com, and people can find the link to the books there as well.
And I've seen in your bio about glitches in the matrix. What is that all about?
So when I started interviewing people and getting stories, there were certain set of stories that really didn't fall into any other category. It wasn't ghost, it wasn't a cryptid, it wasn't anything like that. And so I kind of call them glitches in the matrix. They Some of the stories are skips in time. For example, I have a story of this girl, and she just graduated from high school, and in the summer after she graduated, she worked at a bookstore, and the bookstore was about 30 minutes from her house, and she lived with her mother still. It was just her and her mother. And one morning she got up, she had to be to work, so she was getting ready in the bathroom, and she walked out to tell her mom something, talked to her mom who was sitting in the front room, and she walked into the bathroom, and the next thing she knows, she's in her car about 10 minutes down the road from her house. And she's in shock, and she pulls to the side of the road, and she looks at her watch, and it's the same time, like it's the same time as when she looked a minute ago, but she's further down the road. So she calls her mother on the phone, and the first thing her mother says is, "Why are you calling me from the bathroom?" And she goes, "I'm not in the bathroom, I'm down the road." And she goes, "No, I just watched you walk into the bathroom." And she goes, "I know, I walked into the bathroom. Now I'm down the road. I don't know how I got here." And so not only did she have, this skip somehow where she was in the bathroom and then she wasn't anymore, but she had her mom that could verify that, "No, I watched you walk in the bathroom." And her mother got up and opened the door because she thought she was playing a trick on her, and she wasn't in the bathroom, and her car was gone. She can't figure it out. So it's kind of like a skip somehow, or something that doesn't quite match up, something that doesn't make sense. A few other things that can go under glitches in the matrix is if something that you remember doesn't, it like the facts don't meet what you remember it being. And I'll give you a quick example of that as well. I interviewed a gentleman from Colorado. He grew up in a small town in Colorado. And after he graduated from high school, he went away. He served for his church on a service mission for 2 years. And this was in the 90s. So the only way he could really contact people was by letter, by mail. And when he came back from being gone for 2 years, he found out he was working for a company that was installing, some computers or fixing computers. And he went to this house and he's like, oh, this is my friend's house. And he went in and there was an old lady there and he asked and she said, oh, the family moved away when their daughter died. So he's like, oh, so he went to the library after work and found his friend's obituary. She had died from an appendicitis, and he went to her graveside and saw her grave and everything, and was really bummed because it was a good friend of his. Well, you go forward many years in the future. He went to Utah, went to school, got married, lived in Utah. And one year him and his wife went to visit his mother for Thanksgiving. And they were in there and she said, oh, his mother goes, I forgot the whipped cream. And he goes, I'll run up to the little store and get the whipped cream. And so he leaves, and there's a lot of people bustling around in the store getting the last few things for Thanksgiving. And he comes around the corner and runs into a shopping cart and looks, and it's his friend. And she's got a little boy in the cart.
What?
And he's kind of in shock, and he's like, oh, and she goes, oh, I haven't seen you in forever, and gives him a hug. And he goes, and he's just really confused. And he says, weren't you sick like after high school, or and she goes, oh, I had appendicitis that burst and I almost died, but I made it, but it was really touch and go for a while. And he talks to her for a second, and then he just leaves the whipped cream and drives right to the cemetery, and her headstone is gone where it was. And so his memory of her dying and seeing the headstone that he remembers so vividly, it's different now. Now she's alive and there's no headstone, and she never really died. In this, whatever you call it, she came close to death but didn't die. But he remembers, his memory is of her dying and visiting her, her grave and everything. So if you've heard of the Mandela effect, it's almost like a personal Mandela effect. It's the one where people are remembering things differently than how history says they really are. And so there's a few of those as well, kind of strange things like that I've interviewed people and got their strange stories.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
intense.
Yeah, that one was really intense, and he
Yeah.
was really freaked out, which obviously you would be, because he's like, I felt like I was seeing a ghost. But yeah,
I hope
so
he went back and got the whipped cream and brought it back to his mom's house before he
right.
got in trouble too.
I know exactly. So yeah, so the glitches in the matrix are just different strange experiences that just don't make sense, that happen to people but don't necessarily fall into the other aspects of the paranormal. So
Wow.
yeah.
So since Ghost Hunters came on the air, there's been tons of stories of paranormal that have come out, that have been across the United States that have been broadcast now. I'm sure there are like for you a lot of local stories, but now all of the big stories are out there, like sanitariums and stuff like that. What one of those stories would be something you'd like to go and just visit and see if you have any experience?
Um, I've got a bucket list of places that I want to go visit. There's several in the United States that I can think of, like the famous one that's down near you. I can't remember. It was a sanitarium down there, which is very haunted. There's several places I would love to do a tour of, like the Scottish castles as well, that are really super haunted, in Europe, different places in Europe. Um, and just, I don't have it in front of me, but there's a lot of different places I'd love to see. I'm really trying to convince my wife to go with me to the Stanley Hotel in Colorado
Oh,
and
yes.
spend the weekend. That one's on my list. It's on the shorter part of the list because it's close enough that I could actually get to. So,
You can
but
almost reach out and touch that one.
yeah, so that's a famous one that's not too terribly far from me. But yeah, there's a lot that's going on and that I'd love to go see. So
Yeah, the one by here is the Waverly Hills
yes,
Sanatorium.
that's
And
the one.
we went up there one time. We were up there for something else actually, and me and my daughter are big fans of the paranormal, so we wanted to go there. But it was closed that day. But we drove up and there's a fence, and as we got to the fence, it was about 80 something degrees that day. All of a sudden, both of us had chills through our whole body,
Oh wow.
and someone appeared across the woods in front of us out of nowhere. I said, "Well, I guess this place does have some stuff. Let's get out of here."
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
so
a
we
cool
got the experience
experience.
without going in. So
Yeah.
I believe there is stuff at the Waverly Hills. I don't know if
Yeah.
I'd be brave enough to stay there overnight, but I'd go there to check it out for maybe the 6 hour tour.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, exactly. The other one too, that's actually not open for tours, but it's here in Utah that I would love to be invited to would be the Skinwalker Ranch here in Utah, which has had a lot of strange things, UFOs and paranormal and everything involved. So
You said it's a Skinwalker Ranch.
yeah, Skinwalker Ranch. In fact, they have a television show about it on I think it's on Discovery. They go through some of the stuff um that the experience that they've had there. So it's they have UFOs in that part of Utah. It sits on the edge of a mountain range. It's called the Uinta Mountain Range, and I've got a lot of stories from different people just from the Uintas and that part of the Utah with UFOs and Bigfoot, and ghosts and skinwalkers, and it's just a crazy place. That part of Utah. So
Just the name Skinwalker makes you think it's going to be a creepy place. So
yeah, exactly.
that leaves a lot more to the imagination than it needs to.
Right, exactly.
With your 5 books and your network growing, I'm sure you get a lot of speaking engagements. When's your next speaking engagement and where is it going to be?
So I'm working on some right now that aren't official. Last year, my wife and I put on a paranormal conference here in northern Utah, Para X, and it did so well. We're in the process of doing another one. This one will be a 2 day long, October 14th and 15th in Logan, Utah. And I'm putting that one on and also speaking at that one. And we're going to be slowly announcing some of our guests coming up, but that's going to be a lot of fun if any of your listeners are in the area of that. Last year we had people come from all the way from Las Vegas to it, so
Oh,
it was a lot of fun. And then hopefully I'll get some more speaking gigs. There's I'm in talks with a few, and if any of your listeners are looking for people to talk at paranormal conventions, I have a place on my website as well. They can look up and contact me there. So
awesome. And it's good that the family does it together. So I'm guessing has your wife had other experiences before you two got married and you just, that's how you linked in or just by happenstance?
she had a couple experiences in her life. We I married Annie about 7 years ago, and she's actually been instrumental with all of my books because I'd been collecting stories for all these years. But when I met Annie 7 years ago, and we were dating, and I had to kind of confess because she's like, "What are all these stories that you have?" And I said, I had to explain what I did. But she says, "Well, what are you going to do with them?" And I said, "Well, one day I want to write a book." And she goes, "Why don't you do it now?" And she was just great in like everything. She's been my editor and helped me pick the stories, and so it just kind of snowballed from there. From the first one, she's been just instrumental in all of it. And then also with the paranormal conference, she's right there with me getting everything done, and she's been great. So yeah, it's kind of a family affair for sure.
And that's awesome that you can both share it and you have your biggest cheerleaders right there in your house with you. So that's
Yep.
good. Your motivation and cheerleader right there in the house. And I mean, that's, you can't ask for much more than that.
Nope, it's great. So
So if someone wants to get in contact with you, is the website the best way or is there other avenues?
yep, on the website strangerbridgerland.com, there's all the information about my books. There's a place to contact me on there and find out more information as it comes out about the Para X, and just that's the best place to find all the information. Most of my book, I have all my books that are they're on softback and Kindle form. I have quite a few of them on Audible. I'm working on getting the rest on Audible, and all that information's right there.
Awesome. John, thanks for taking some of your time this evening to share your story with the Misfit Nation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Have a good night.
You too.